Hey beekeepers, welcome back to the Hive Doctor, your beekeeping mentor. Today, I've made the decision that I'm going to be folding up this yard and taking all these colonies to fill holes in my other apiary locations. I'm going to go through how I'm going to do this because I'm doing it by myself. As you can see, I'm stacked up a little bit. I'm on the second half of a nectar flow. So how in the world am I going to move these hives? I've got 9 of them here. How am I going to move them by myself? Those are some of the tips and tricks I'm going to show you. It's a pretty cool strategy in my opinion. So if you're curious about that, and even if you're not, stick around. So for years, this has been one of my favorite locations. It's way out, national forest. It's got amazing forage, and it's never failed to make me a honey crop. But one of the issues this year is that out of these 9 colonies, only 1 has made honey. So with this yard also being 45 minutes away from home, I've decided it's just a bit too much to keep it up and not quite worth maintaining with all the gas and the time to and fro with the equipment that I need to do. I love this yard. There's a creek. It's in a beautiful valley. It even provides lots of fall forage, but it's time to shut it down and move on to the next phase of what I'm going to be doing. So as you can imagine, moving colonies during a nectar flow is not really ideal. They're heavier, there's a lot of weight, especially when it comes to one person moving them. It can be a backbreaker. So I've come up with a plan that will serve me well and work out with my particular situation, with my truck still being off the road, having to use my Jeep. And what that is going to entail is going through the yard and making splits. So I'm going to be taking a split, just one, from each colony, and I'm going to relocate those splits and thereby making the existing parent colonies that I split from that are still in this yard lighter and easier to move when the time comes. So right now I'm in the second half of May, and I plan on moving this yard sometime in the beginning of June. I'm going to have to juggle that around with harvesting and extracting honey as well. So it'll be a very busy time. So prepping now is going to help me later. Plus, since it's still during the nectar flow, I'm going to let these girls raise their own queens instead of rearing queens myself, which I will start not long after. But with all these extra resources coming in with pollen and nectar, that's a really an ideal time to get a colony to raise a good quality queen. And I'm going to stay on top of things. If I find that a colony or two is not raised a queen, they'll be near other colonies that have brood that I can give them, or they may run into the timing to where I start raising queens and I can just give them a queen cell and raise one from there. So this really kills 2 birds with 1 stone, wanting to make splits and getting my colonies moved in a way that one person can do it. Now you may ask yourself, hey, Hive Doctor, why are you going to allow colonies that didn't really make any honey raise their own queens? Aren't you just spreading the genetics of those non-honey making qualities? And yeah, maybe, but it's also highly doubtful because the majority of this yard did not make any honey. To me, that suggests more of an environmental condition in this area, not necessarily genetic. And when it comes to a poor hive, there's so many other factors involved. Maybe the queens didn't mate well. Maybe she was damaged during a hive inspection and it really messed up her laying abilities and I didn't realize it. There's a lot of guesswork, but no matter what, whenever a colony creates a new queen, they always do better than the old one. So that new virgin, she's going to run around. When she gets mated, she's going to do just fine. And if she's not, by then I will have chosen from my higher quality queens, raised some queens from those, and then distributed them among the colonies. So either way, it's a win-win. When you know what you're doing in beekeeping, it helps. I'm not saying I know everything, because for sure I don't, but I know enough to not worry. And that's a big deal in beekeeping, Because I'm sure, as you know, especially as beginners, you worry, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing enough? So with that said, what I'm going to be doing here today is making 2 splits at a time, transporting them to the nearest apiary location, coming back, making 2 more splits, and so on until I've got them all ready. By then, I will have broken them down to movable sizes. And what I'm going to be doing is, when I make these splits, I'm going to leave the queen with the original parent colony. I need all the queens to stay in this yard, because if I take the queens with me, I'll have to keep these colonies here until they have raised a queen, she has mated, and started laying. And that's going to be too long for when I need to relocate these colonies. So every split I take away today, those are the ones that are going to have to raise a new queen. And that's great because they'll be closer to home and I can keep an eye on them better to make sure they do in fact get that queen, and so that they can thrive throughout the rest of the year. Okay, so I'm prepped up to make my splits. I got my ratchet straps in place under my equipment that I'm splitting into. So that's ready. I don't have to lift the hive afterwards. It's just empty equipment. It's easy to lift up, get those straps underneath, so that by the time I'm done with this, I've got my hive cover over here I can slap on, ratchet strap it, and leave it there until I make my second split. Then I'll move both of them into the vehicle. Now, you want to plug up the entrances so that they don't get out in the vehicle, or if you got them in the back of the truck, so you don't get too many that go, fly away, and you don't want to lose your field force while you're trying to transport your colonies. So you can use rags. I've got toilet paper I'm going to just plug the holes in the front of my box with. And since these are screen bottom boards, I know that even if it was like super hot in the middle of summer, that they're not going to overheat. That's going to be a thought you want to keep in mind, especially if you do not use screen bottom boards. When you transport your bees, if they're inside of your vehicle, make sure that you keep those windows open so that any escaping bees can get out and fly away. You don't want them in your face while you're driving. And so that your bees don't overheat, because they're being forced to stay in the colony. Now, during the middle of the day, it's okay to relocate a split without worry of losing field force. That's not something I would do if I was moving the entire colony. I would wait until evening or very early morning to move the whole colony so that I didn't have any field force away from the colony. Now, if I did do something like that and they came back and their home was gone, they would eventually just join the next door hive that I would call a catch hive. And I've done that quite a bit and it works out great, especially if the next hive over is weak. Then that extra boost in foragers will help them out big time. So I'm going to take off my quilting box and set this to the side. And remember, I told you that I'm leaving my queens here in this yard, which means I have to locate the queen. And I don't mark my queens, I never have. They're pretty much easy enough to find. But I have had those days where I needed to find her and couldn't see her for anything. Now this is a brand new honey super I've got on top, and they haven't even begun to draw out comb on the frames. It's a bit disappointing being halfway through the nectar flow and they're just now like gathering on the bottom of the box, thinking about doing something with it. That's part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. But the deep here, that's a good looking box of bees. They're gentle, they're calm. I can tell that they're queen right because of their attitude. And so I'm going to go through here and find food and brood to bring over here. I'm just making small splits. I'm not necessarily splitting it in half of equal strength. I just want something that can raise a queen and that I can build up enough by the time fall comes to go into winter with confidence that they're going to make it through. So as always, I start on the outside frame. I don't ever, for the most part, try to take frames out of the middle of a brood chamber because I don't want to take any chances of rolling the queen between 2 frames. She's most likely going to be on that brood. All right, got my first frame out, moving it nice and gentle. It's full of open nectar. We're starting to cap a little bit of it. See that glisten? That's incoming nectar. And you see on this side, you see the dark and light comb. The dark comb is old. That light comb is most likely where I scraped off wax moth damage, and they have rebuilt it this year during the nectar flow. And so that's why it's white, because it's fresh new comb. Now this is not necessarily a frame I want to take, but I am going to glance for the queen. I don't see her. I don't have my frame perch with me, so I'm just going to perch the frame right there. Next frame over, it's quite heavy, probably not going to be brood yet. No, they have emptied a spot for brood, but it's mostly just honey. You know what? That's going to be a good frame for food. So this is going to be the first frame I take. I've already created space in the box here. I've taken out 4 frames. And so honey should always be an outside frame. And I don't mean outside in my split. These are empty frames for the bees to grow into. It needs to be the outside of my nucleus, my nuke. Just the few frames I'm taking, whether it's 4, 5. Next frame, little smoke, just to remind them I'm here. Looks like my smoker's gone out. I'll have to relight that. Okay. Now this frame has got all 3 stages of brood. This is going to be an ideal candidate for my new split to be able to raise a queen from and provide them reinforcements from the capped brood and the larva, all the growing brood here, until they're able to raise another queen. Again, I don't see the queen, and they're going to know they're queenless today. When I move them, they'll know really quickly that they don't have a queen, and they will choose the ideal aged larva to start force feeding royal jelly to. And within 10 days from probably tomorrow, I'll have a new queen emerging, or queens. They'll probably make multiple cells. This is a frame of capped brood and honey. Not the greatest pattern. There's a lot of larvae on this side. They're still very calm. And one of the really cool advantages to doing this and having a colony raise its own queen is that you create a break in the brood cycle, which means you also create a break in the life cycle of the varroa mite. So it's just another way to keep mites at bay. Now, whenever I make splits, I like to give them at least 2 frames of brood. One frame, a lot of capped brood, and the other open brood, so the young stuff, eggs and larvae, so they can make a queen from that. The reason I give them a frame of capped brood, so they have immediate reinforcements and nurse bees to help raise that queen. She's telling me it's time to light my smoker again. So I'm going to put that back and go do exactly that. All right, with my smoker lit, I'm going to remind them I'm here, smoke it around me a little bit, get those bees out of my face. These girls over here, so far, they're being quite calm. One of the things that you'll want to keep track of is if you're having trouble finding the queen and you've already taken some frames and put them over here, after a little while, the queenless side will start to buzz, this nervous buzz. They know that the queen is missing. They don't smell her pheromones so strongly anymore. And likely the one where you hear that buzz is the one missing the queen. So you'll want to start looking in the one where they're calm. And I don't believe we've gotten to that point yet. They haven't been open long enough. All right, this is mostly capped brood. I need to see inside of this queen cell. So I'm going to blow the bees away out of my sight. It's not charged. In other words, it doesn't have an egg or larva in it. Still no queen. That's okay. There's still a few frames to look at and go through. This one's a little bit lighter. That bee's stinging me. Time to smoke them a little bit. Again. That's what happens when you don't stay on a smoker. It goes out way too easily. Okay. Let's put this back. One of the things about keeping your smoker lit, if you pack it too quickly, too soon, it will go out on you. Okay, let's give that last frame another look. I do not see the golden butt. I'm still on frames of brood. I anticipate one more frame of brood before I start getting to more honey. Nope, just honey and pollen. But there's the queen checking things out. So she was on that last frame I was thinking that she would maybe be on. Right there in center. Now, in my opinion, this queen is a bit small. Perhaps did not mate well. She's not really plumped up like you want to see your queen. So knowing where the queen is, I'm going to set her aside carefully and safely against their own box here. Ideally, you should do that on a frame perch on the side of your colony. But now I can finish going through and deciding what resources I want to take to give to my split. All right, so with these other frames, they've got room to grow. And by the way, these are already drawn out comb, so they're going to grow quickly as soon as they get that queen mated and raised. I'm going to take one more frame of brood. They've got open brood to make a queen, so I'm going to take some capped brood and another frame with eggs just to ensure that I have given them what they need to raise a queen. And I always love to put the capped open brood in towards the center, the middle. That's the most protected area. And now I'm going to put one more frame in there with food on it, maybe a little bit of capped brood to make sure they've got plenty of food. And this is a good one right here. You see you've got plenty of capped honey in the corners, rainbowing the frame. I've got a little bit of capped brood right there under the bees. You can see it. And on the other side, even more capped honey, a little bit of nectar, or excuse me, a little bit of pollen. That's pretty cool. All right, this is going to be my last outside frame. And now my split is done. I'm just going to space the frames. They'll move a little bit as I drive. Keep that in mind. You want to drive as carefully as you can. You don't want to brake too hard. You don't want to accelerate too quickly. And now I'm going to put a hive cover on them. Okay, now it's time to plug those entrances. Put this hive back together. Exchange some empty frames I took from this one and give it to them. And I'll probably put their empty honey super back on just because I don't feel like hauling it back. Maybe they'll do something with it this last half of the nectar flow. Maybe they won't. But either way, it's a way to store my equipment and not have to deal with it right now. So this is just one of many ways you could do a split. There's so many different ways of splitting. It really depends on your circumstances and your goals. And when you put this parent colony back together, you want to put all the frames that they were working on together and put those empty frames on the outside. So they're growing from the inside out. Okay, here's the frame with our queen. I'm going to do a double check to make sure I didn't lose her in the grass. She could have crawled into that box on the ground, but I do see the queen. She's here. So now I can safely put this frame back into the parent colony and then begin backfilling my frames. I'm going to show you one thing, a strategy that I do when I've got a queen-right colony about putting frames back, especially during a nectar flow. All right, so all the holes you see are frames I took and gave to my split. So now it's time to put this back together. This is a frame of just honey. So what I want to do to help them draw out more for me and fill with nectar, I'm going to put a frame in between. I'm going to checkerboard. And I feel that it's okay to checkerboard in a brood nest when you've already got comb on a frame. Not so much bare frames. I'm not a big fan of checkerboarding bare frames in a brood chamber. In a honey super, fine, you can do that all day long. But I don't want to disrupt their brood nest because they keep that at a certain order. All right, those frames are spaced tight together. I've got 3 more frames to put in, all with drawn comb. I'm going to make this one my outside frame on here. No, I'm not. I want that to be closer. I'm going to put 1 frame in here as a place for the queen to begin laying. And so what will happen is the bees, the workers, will clean that frame up, clean out the cells, and then she'll start laying. I'm going to put this one up close. And then these last 2 empty frames, but drawn out, will finish this off that they can move into on the very outside. And now I'm going to replace my honey super on top. Make sure that my frames are tight together, because if they do draw these out, I want them to draw straight, even comb. And now it's time to top it off with my quilting box and hive cover, and I am done. So if you have any questions about splits or moving colonies, which you can check out my video here about how to move a colony safely, let me know in the comments below. Draw me one of these, tell your friends about the Hive Doctor, and I'll see you in the next video.